Hello and welcome to this Introduction to Generative AI workshop. In this session today, we're going to be covering understanding AI and generative AI, understanding the uses of AI and ChatGPT, considering the ethical implications, and discussing what is academia. This session will cover things like what is AI, what is ChatGPT, how to engage ethically, academic integrity, but it will not cover searching for information, academic writing, referencing, or penalties for academic misconduct. Before we get started in this session, I think it's extremely important to say that AI is an ever-evolving landscape and things are regularly changing, whether that is with the tools themselves, the culture around the tools, or the legal ramifications of using these tools. Some things that might be said in this workshop might not be relevant in a couple days' time or even in a year's time. So it's always best to keep on top of the news and understand what's happening in AI. This workshop is designed to just discuss more broadly about AI, so hopefully nothing changes too much, but always keep on top of the news. AI, also known as artificial intelligence, is a worldwide hot topic, which develops at a very fast pace, which can be exciting but also quite scary and bewildering. ChatGPT is one of the more well-known versions of this technology. You might have used it, you might have heard about it before, especially in the news, and its potential uses across loads of different things can have a massive impact, whether that is for job employment, whether that is for making your job easier, whether that is for making research and education easier, but it also comes with a lot of different topics to discuss around that too. No matter what your stance is, it's very important to understand that it's not going to go away anytime soon, and it will be increasingly used within the context of education as well as our working lives, so we need to understand how to use it and how best to interact with it. What you can see here is that a lot of companies already have a form of artificial intelligence, and it's really important to understand that you might not even be realizing that you are using it. Now, AI in itself comes and splits into various different terms, but some AI can be really beneficial and won't really affect sort of academic misconduct and things like that. So you might have used a magic eraser in image manipulation software before, like Google Photos. There's also formula completion in Excel. Now, this has been around for years at this point, where you can type in a very simple formula like equals sum, which will calculate a sum of the numbers that you put into various boxes, and that will typically automatically generate for you, which is a form of artificial intelligence. We also have had predictive text now in phones for a very long time. Even the very early 2000 phones, which you would have the big numpad for, it would predict words to save you from repetitively typing in certain keys. And as more modern technologies has happened, you have the predictive text that appears alongside the keyboard just as a sort of prompt, essentially. It will say these are words that you commonly use, and from there it will then structure a sentence out, or maybe predict a word or a phrase you're going to say. So this isn't anything new. It has been around for a very long time. What we're really talking about when we think about generative AI is a term of AI that refers to deep learning models. And essentially the way this works is it's looking at loads of different sets of data and compiling them all, reading through them, and generating a response based on a prompt that you have created or suggested. So let's think about a conversational text program such as Bard or ChatGPT. These two are very common right now. You've probably heard of at least one of them. But essentially, imagine thinking of auto-suggestions like we just mentioned for the text prompts, for example. You can get a half-logical sentence out of just hitting those text prompts. Generative AI is a much bigger version of that AI, because it's not just looking at what you do, it's looking at everything around that, and then it's going to generate something. Now, what is really important to take away from what I just said is that it doesn't understand what it says, it's just looking at everything that is said around it. So when we're looking at something like this, it can be in a vacuum or a bubble. So let's say that I am going to create an AI that's completely independent of the internet, and it's only going to access things that I can put into it, for example. This means that if I say the sky is a different color other than blue or white or gray, let's say the sky is green, for example, or the sky is bright pink, it will generate any text response where you ask what color of the sky, and it will say one of those random colors because that's what I fed into it. If we're looking in a broader context then, with it being connected to the internet, it's that same bubble. It just scrapes a lot of information. It's not aware, it doesn't understand what the context are, and truthfully, it's not 100% safe. It's definitely not secure. So it's really important to understand this, especially when it comes to using AI applications in different countries. Just because we don't know how the data is held when you put something into it, we're also not 100% sure how the data is pulled together to give a response. It does scrape information from pretty much anywhere it can get its hands on. So let's say it does pull some information from a Wikipedia article. That Wikipedia article can be edited by everyone, which means the AI might not have an accurate piece of information. So this really comes down to, should you be using AI in an academic sense? So we're going to start with researching, is it a good or bad idea? Truthfully, it depends on how you use it. The problem is it has a problem with authority, okay? So anything it generates, you can't take it as face value. We don't know where the data set's coming from. We don't know how it's being generated. We don't know where it's pulled that information from. We're not 100% sure if it has a bias. While you would think it wouldn't have a bias, because of the sources it pulls from, it can pull out a very one-sided bias. AI in itself is very keen on making you pleased with an answer, so it will always try and side with you, even if the answer's wrong. We also have to understand about copywriting. AI has been known to steal a lot of work. It's doing that big scrape of data. So we have to understand about fair use and when we can't use something. And another very important thing to understand is also the ethics that also comes from that, not only from stealing other people's work, but what it can generate out. There has been a few instances, and there's quite a few research papers going on at the moment about AI generating quite some harmful stereotypes within certain communities, which are based on some very destructive sources that it's pulled from. So it's very important to understand where this data is coming from. Another thing you might have heard when using AI is around hallucinations. And hallucinations are essentially, as they sound, it's the AI making something up and presenting it as true. So for example, we go back to the sky. If I say, what color is the sky, and it starts hallucinating by saying the sky is a bright green color, for example. Obviously that is factually not true. So it's generated something and it's hallucinated something. This could also mean that when you're using it in research, for example, you could be researching a topic and you say, where can I find this source, or provide me some information about this topic. It can hallucinate and generate a completely false source. So all of that information is not true. It's just what the AI is built, and it's pretty much useless. As with the internet as well, the Google search is only pulling from very general publications and what it can access. And as students, we need to be looking and finding academic resources to help us become specialists in those topics that we're looking towards. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't use AI to help you with the foundation of research. I think it's a very good idea that you can use it. I'm not saying you should use it all the time, but if you are struggling or you're looking for, let's see what we can build around this topic, is first draw some conclusions about the topic that you want to research, and then maybe ask AI, here are some of the topics and here's my overall topics. Can you suggest some more topics, or maybe break down something so that I can go and research it myself, for example. So this comes down to the CRAP test. So when you're getting an answer from an AI, it's always best to understand, and this goes for any resource really, is put it through the crap test. So we're looking at the currency, the relevance, the authority, accuracy, and purpose of a source. So are we, how relevant is the information? Is it out of date? Is it current, for example? That's regarding currency. Is it relevant? So does it meet the needs of your information? Does that support what you're trying to do overall? Where's the source? And this isn't something that we can easily define by AI. You can ask it, can you give me the sources you use? But then you have to go back and check it. So I 100% recommend doing that. Is it truthful? Is it accurate? Is it correct? This is something where you do need to go and do further research into the topic to be able to understand what it's saying and doing. And then what is the purpose for the information existing? In this case, it's that you've asked an AI bot to generate you something. So you need to then go on out and explore and understand that further. When it comes down to the ethical issues, especially in education, is that we're not looking at how you use these tools. We're looking at, and qualifying you on something that you know. So we're not looking for the AI's regurgitated answer. We're looking for you to have the knowledge and skill set in your area to be able to then showcase that off in a way that not only reflects your skill set, but also reflects in what you've studied as well. So you can use the tools ethically. They can support your learning, but we're not looking for something that equally damages your learning and your own critical thinking skills at the same time. So let's look at researching with AI tools again. We need to determine the limitations of generative AI. We've got to understand what is fact and what is fiction. ChatGPT will tell you what you want to hear. So it can be very good as an argument tool. You can say, I want you to be completely against what I said, provide resources, provide sources, and you can have a discussion with it like you would a person. And then you can read through everything it generates. So it can be quite good. But you've got to understand that there can be biased intentions. You can set the biased intentions yourself, but it can also come from the random sources it's pulling from. So make sure you understand that, as well as the ethical issues as well. Now, I've presented a lot of negatives there. AI can be a very distracting tool, but I think it can be very helpful as well. So how can you use it in a way that doesn't break academic conduct, in a way that can help you while also not misinforming and spreading dis and misinformation? I'd recommend here's some ways you can use it. So first we have mind mapping. So let's say you want to create a PowerPoint on a subject, right? You have some ideas yourself, but you think, oh, I'm not sure about this slide. Maybe I need this area a little bit expanded. You can ask AI, I'm working on the PowerPoint. Here are the slides I've got so far. What areas could you recommend that I add in to help support my topic? And it will give you a nice structured response. It can help you create some slides in the sense of these are the topics you should consider. I wouldn't ask it about the topics. I would just say, okay, that's cool. I'm going to explore those on my own. You can ask it for a mind map, for example, and it can be very good at that. We do have resources that are available for you to access regarding essay structure, but AI also does a fairly semi-decent job at doing this too, so it can be very good just to help you plot out an idea in your mind of how things should be structured. One thing that's on this slide, which I'm a little bit wary about, so I'll be completely honest, I think it can be a good thing, but just be very careful. This one's a very slippery slope, is asking for an explanation of the topic. So let's say you've got quite a complex topic and you're just not getting it. One thing you can do is you can put that into AI and say, can you please explain this to me like I'm a child or like I'm a high school student or however you want to explain it, and it will attempt to break down the topic. The problem is, and like I said this earlier, it is pulling sources from, it's scraping sources from anywhere it can get its hands on, so that information might not be right. It can be very good at helping that light bulb click, but it can also make you more confused as well. So please read the sources and ask it for sources so you can understand where it's got that information from. Like I said, it can be very good at helping that light bulb, turn on. It can also be quite distracting too. Another thing AI can be used for, yet again, another slippery slope, is writing suggestions. So things like Grammarly now use AI to help you restructure sentences. when we're looking at things like this, it's more about looking at, maybe your grammar is slightly off, maybe you've got a few spelling mistakes. That's fine. However, using AI to rewrite something which is saying something different than what you wrote originally, that's where the line's drawn. So be very careful of how you're using this. It's very good and can be very helpful for people who have grammar issues, or you want something to sound a little bit clearer than you are writing down. It can be good for that. Just make sure that it is what you've said it is and it's not what an AI has generated. Yet again, you can ask it for writing feedback, and you can ask it, am I missing any elements? What do you think I can add in? Make sure it's not generating things for you, because we're not looking for the AI's generation. We're looking for your critical thinking and your knowledge. But it can be very good at going, maybe you need to flesh this point out because it's not clear, for example. And it can be very good at doing that. Additional things are, if you're writing notes very quickly, you can turn notes into Prowse, which makes it a more formalized and more correctly formatted way of note-taking, which can be very helpful, especially if you're in a very quick environment. You can also see adaptive writing styles, so you can ask it to review your writing style and see what can be improved and if it remains consistent, which is very good. And you can also ask it to help you polish up text as well, but bearing in mind, just be aware what it's generating and what it's not. Let's move over to essay structure. So we did mention this on the last slide, but I do just want to show that on the left here, you can see that we do have the library resource regarding essay structures. And as you can see on the right, ChatGPT has generated something that is very, very similar to what we have as a resource. What I want to say about this is that it's very good at building a foundation, but it's the content you put on top that really helps flesh it out. Sometimes you don't need to use ChatGPT to generate you an essay structure. We do have resources that are very in-depth and will help you plan these out effectively and efficiently through the academic skills team. So be sure to read through some of those resources. But overall, AI, as we can see in this example here, it can be quite good at just helping you prompt those next phases to your assignment. So let's say you've heard everything I said, which is great. You're aware that AI does generate things. Let's help you get what you want from the systems you're using. Okay, so we're going to be looking at prompt engineering now. And what we mean by this is asking the right questions to the AI to get a response that is effective for you. And this comes down into two primary sections, technically three, but we'll get into that in a minute. The first is understanding that the more information you give a program, the better it will be for the output. It is best to be used as a formatting tool, not a researching tool. And we should also consider the first bit for the prompt is who, what, and why. So every time you type in a question, this is what we're going to use. Who is the answer for? What do you need? And why do you need it? And the second part of this, and this is a repeatable process, is using prep and edit. And we'll get into this, but essentially, once you've got a question, so we will say, let's have write a funny short story for a 6-year-old. That is our question here. We're going to introduce the question. We're going to give it a role. So we've given it a role of a storyteller from our question. We've asked it to write a story for us, and we've set the parameter being short. So we've also got our who, what, and why question in there as well. That's got to generate a response. So the first response we get from this is, once upon a time in a magical land called Giggleville, there was a little giraffe named Gerald. Gerald had a long neck and loves to tell jokes. He had spots all over his body that looked like funny faces, and everyone in Gigglesville loved him because he could always make them laugh. That's great. I personally probably wouldn't want to change that. But let's say we did want to change that. This is where we will use edit. So we've had our who, what, and why question. We've then moved on to prep. Moving on to edit, we're going to evaluate the AI's response. We're going to look at the language. We're going to look at the facts and the structure. We're first going to ask it, where has this come from? So in the context of this short story, it doesn't really matter. But if you are looking for a source, or you've asked it a question Ask it, where has this come from? Collaborate it with a source. So you can ask it for its source, you can compare it to other sources you've read. Identify the bias and mis and disinformation, and then you can transform the content to reflect adjustments to what you've read in the determine and identify phase. You can also ask another question, adjust it to new findings, and essentially repeat the process. So maybe you want to slightly edit the question. So instead of it being a short story, you might want to turn that into a long story and make it not about a giraffe. So we will change the instructions to be something completely different as well. Another way to use generative AI, so we've gone over those examples, but we can use it to expand and evolve an idea. So first, send it that question, send it that idea, and we've got to review the key takeaways and response. We've got to note down what is missing and what we would like to add and develop, and then we can type that back into the AI and have a conversation with it. So let's say I wanted to improve this slide here. I could put the slide into generative AI, such as ChatGPT, and go, here's my slide, what do you think's missing? And we can have that conversation about what it thinks missing. Maybe I disagree and I don't want it to be overcomplicated, and it will come back and it will carry on and develop those ideas. And this carries on all the way through AI. So it's really important to understand and have a conversation with the model to really understand where it's pulling that information from and also understand the project itself. If we have to summarize this section, I would summarize it like this. Who is your question for? What is it you're trying to do? Why are you using AI to do it? As well as why do you need that question in AI for it to explain for you? Then understand, once you've got a response, what it's saying, where it's got that information from. Is this information actually useful for me to use? And understand where this fits in your academic conduct as well. Here we have PowerPoint Designer. Every time you open PowerPoint now, if you go into the Home tab on the right, you'll see a designer icon. If you have a PowerPoint slide, it will give you an idea of some ways to quickly change a PowerPoint to make it look a little bit more visually interesting. This generally uses templates or other frequently used models that people have used in the past, and it can be quite helpful to visualize something. So while I have covered some very scary just generative AI things, we do have generative AI built into PowerPoint, which you can play around with very quickly. Going back to another very grey area is writing code. Like essays, you will need to have a basic understanding of the correct information to see errors and correct issues in AI. It can write out, I'll be completely honest, it can write out very basic information. It can write out very basic coding for you to use. The problem is, if you rely on it, it might write code inefficiently, it can write code wrong, things can break, it will break just as easily if you did it. Typically though, it's not very good at writing code as a replacement for someone, because what happens when that code does break, or you've used AI too extensively to write a piece of code, you won't understand how that code works. So it's not very efficient in the sense of doing more complicated things or just learning or just operating a system in general. As a learning method, it can be useful. You can generate some code and break it down with it, and it can be quite useful, but it's also got to use certain ways of doing something, which can be helpful, but equally can be quite harmful, especially when you're doing something that's quite experimental, or maybe you need to do some patchwork, for example. It's only got to try and present one answer as the correct way when there can be different solutions to one question. So be aware of that. So overall, using AI in academia. This is a quote that I heard from one of the academic librarians. Is a great place to start, a terrible place to finish. And I 100% agree with that. It can be very good at building the foundations, finding those initial talking points, for example, or helping you structure something. Maybe you want to review something you've written. However, using it as a replacement for your brain, as funny as that sounds, can be quite dangerous. It's not going to be very effective. And ultimately, it will be damaging your own critical thinking skills. I think it's very important to be able to think about something for yourself without having to use the very much binary system of an AI. It will try and present things in a yes or no fashion. And hopefully, as some of you might know, the world is never, white or black. It's a very grey thing. So being able to then ask it a question and break down and understand the response it's giving you is very important to do. Okay, it's very important to understand why it said something. It's also important to understand the sources. It's important to understand the sources as you come across them. It's even more important to understand them as the AI generates them. Okay, so it's very important to understand all of that. You are a scholar while you are at university. You have to work with honesty and attribute your ideas to the previous authors. An AI isn't an author, it's purely generating stuff and stealing content from others. So you've got to understand where all that information comes from and digest it properly. You've got to understand that evidence is a very big key of moving forward towards worldwide learning. Academic and integrity policy and plagiarism clearly states that students are to hand in their own work, and that using a person or a tool to present work that has not been worked on by the student counts as a break in academic conduct policy. What this means is using an AI to write your assignment will break your academic policy and you will be questioned about your work. I think another important thing just to note on this is that different courses will allow you to use AI in different functions. Some courses will flat out refuse the use of AI, so you have to understand in your assignment brief where you can use AI. So some courses might allow you to use it to generate some ideas, to do a little bit of research in, as long as it's, you're checking through the facts later. Other courses will not allow you to use it, full stop. So read your assignment brief. It's very important to understand that as well. Now, this was a very full-on session. I understand if you have loads of questions, there's new questions that pop up all the time, which is perfectly fine. We do have a AI and ChatGPT library guide over on our LibGuides, so please go on there, have a read through. There is a second part to this workshop as well, so as part of this video series, you'll be able to watch that as well, which covers some of the image generation and video generation, as well as missing different information, so please go and watch that as well. But if you do have any questions, hop over to the library guide and be sure to pop any questions you've got over there. Additionally, this workshop does run live as well, so there is a questions section. So if you do have any questions and you want to have a discussion with me or another librarian, feel free to hop into one of those and ask those questions there as well. It's always a great place to have a conversation. We'll look for the platform to discuss these topics on, so please feel free to join one of those live workshops as well. If you are looking for any of these workshops, you'll be able to find them over on the LibGuides section under workshops. There's a calendar link and you'll be able to see everything on there.